Have you ever planned to do something productive, only to find yourself 3 hours later in some kind of YouTube loop? Or have you ever chased dopamine rushes like gambling or drinking, only to wake up with regret the day after? If so, you're not alone. Hi, I'm Tom and welcome to the Dopamine Factory, where we aim to understand life and craft happiness. And today we're going to talk about controlling your inner self. And let's start this episode with a personal story. So last year I was really in the poker flow, which all started after I became second in a couple of tournaments, which earned me some substantial amount of money. And all of this made me feel amazing. Or to be more concrete, I was literally feeling the dopamine rushing through my body all the time. That was until I realized that there's also the other side of the coin. Because the better my mood was just after playing poker, the larger my craving was to go again. And now by itself, I don't think a craving is a bad thing, right? It's also a sign that you're passionate about something, which creates a lot of happiness in life. But the moment I started to play poker sessions while I actually had many other important things to do, I realized that I was slightly out of control and that it was time to take action to gain back that control. So in today's video, we are going to explore the thin line between experiencing excitement for certain activities and being in control of your own behavior. So let's get into it. Gaining control over your behavior is like raising a little puppy, which is by itself joyful and curious, but sometimes also a bit naive and out of line, since it does not fully understand yet that it's really not such a good idea to run across a street full of traffic. So luckily, we as an owner can hold the dog on the line. Not per se to spoil the fun of the doggy, but mainly to protect the dog from itself and set limits on where the puppy can and cannot go. So, for example, when we walk next to a dangerous highway, we better line up the doggy. But when we walk next to a green park, we for sure can also let the dog free for it to unleash all its excitement on the spot. And this is the same balance we are looking for in all of our behaviors. By which I mean that most of the time we want to be in control of ourselves. But at set times it's also okay to allow ourselves to let go of the line. And by using these two matrices, we can basically identify 4 categories of behaviors in our individual lives. So firstly, we have the activities that trigger high excitement and are in high control, which I labeled as the disciplined dog. This is the equivalent of a few beers on a Friday night and then you just go home. Or playing a tournament where you just stop after your first rebuy. It's hard to do, but you basically find the perfect balance between having fun while still being in control, which is our ultimate goal for most activities. Then secondly, we have the activities that give low excitement but are in high control, also known as the checklist chameleon. And this is the equivalent of filling spreadsheets or doing the laundry or doing budgeting. Like, no need for intervention here. Like, all activities fits perfectly into your life. We just would have wished that these activities would sometimes be a bit more fun. Then thirdly, we have the activities that trigger high excitement and are low in control. And these are also known as the earlier discussed wild pups. And this is basically the equivalent of doing crypto trading at 3 a.m. in the night, or drinking till you black out, or doing endless race shopping, click, 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 click. Sure, it's fun for a while, but it's also not really sustainable behavior on the long run. So we want to get this behavior more in control, which we work on later on. And then lastly, we have the activities that trigger low excitement and are also low in control, also known as the screen zombies. And this is in real life the equivalent of mindless scrolling or chain smoking or endless app checking. And even though you're not choosing or enjoying this behavior anymore, you're still somehow doing it, being stuck in your pattern. And this is the worst kind of behavior, right? And this will also require most of your urgent action to gain back control over yourself and over your life. So, how to gain back control over these behaviors? For this, we first need to better understand one of the key mechanisms that drives excitement in our body, the loop of desire, or also known as the habit loop. A self-enforcing mechanism that takes place in your limbic system, which is the group of interconnected brain structures that help to regulate your emotions and behavior, and consists of 4 steps. The whole loop starts with a cue. And a cue can be external, like a message pinging you, the smell of food, or just seeing the poker table. But it can also be internal, like boredom, or stress, or hunger, or fatigue. And a cue is something your brain has learned to associate with something potentially rewarding. And after your brain gets this cue, it also quickly scans your memory, asking, have you seen this cue before? And did something good happen the last time afterwards? And when something positive happened last time afterwards, directly some dopamine gets released in your body as a motivational burst. Which brings us to step number 2, the craving. When the dopamine signal gets released, it travels through your brain's reward pathway to the parts that drive anticipation and motivation in your body, which triggers your body to gear up for action. So your focus locks on what it wants, your heart rate increases a little, you might feel more restless, and your brain starts bargaining. Just 5 minutes, just 1 click. Is that too much to ask? And that's when the emotional pressure starts to build in your body, also known as craving, which is basically pushing your body actively to satisfy its needs. Which brings us to step number 3, getting moving. When the craving for a certain behavior is strong enough or long enough, then at some point you might just do it. And you decide to grab your phone or open the poker app, or you reach for that 1 cookie inside. Even when at that point the reasoning part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, said no. Which brings us to the last step, number 4, the temporary feeling. Once an action is completed, your brain expects a reward. And this can be a win, or a like, or a hit of sugar, which gives your body a moment of relief and a drop in cravings and anxiety. And this is also where the reward system becomes self-reinforcing. Because once you get a shot of dopamine, it feels great, for sure. But this also triggers your body to chase the next spike and the next spike, which then motivates you to show that behavior again and again and again. And by this we do not even take into account that the reward for your behavior will decrease over time, because you get used to it, which is often the moment that this shot of dopamine is replaced by habit, which at its turn makes that at some point a cue or a craving by itself already can be enough to trigger you to show certain behavior, even when the behavior is no longer fun, no longer helpful, or no longer healthy anymore. And that's where the real screen zombies, bench drinkers and gamblers are born. Luckily, we have some tools in our body that can slow down or stop this behavioral loop. And the most prominent one is your prefrontal cortex, the part in your brain that is responsible for a higher level of cognitive functions like decision making, reasoning, and social behavior. The prefrontal cortex has, however, not an easy task. Not only does it need to be a counterforce against this loop of desire, it's also fragile and starts to go offline when it's under a lot of pressure. For example, due to a lack of sleep or when it's bombarded with constant stimulation, which then in its turn increases the chances that it loses its battle from the limbic system, the part of your brain that drives excitement. This is why we need to help our prefrontal cortex to stay in control of our behavior. And to prevent that the puppy itself is taking over the line and throws itself in front of a car, we have identified 5 behavioral strategies to stay in control and prevent all of this from happening. With the first one being walk the dog on a schedule and have a routine. The saying goes that a puppy walked on a schedule doesn't scratch the door all day because it knows its moment will come. And the same applies to almost all behaviors. Like in general, when you have a positive routine, this lowers the activation energy for good habits and raises the bar for bad habits, which makes it much easier to stick to certain principles. Let's go to behavioral strategy number 2. Set the leash length and have some rules. Holding a dog on a line is, as we discussed earlier, not a punishment, but it's for safety. And this is the case for most rules. They mainly help you. And rules are basically pre-decisions that bypass emotional bargaining and help you to stick to certain principle. So dare to set clear boundaries by defining budgets, or by setting if-then rules, or by, deciding how much time you will spend on a certain activity. Because when the boundaries are set well, it will help you to find the right balance between satisfying your needs and also keeping control over your body. Which brings us to behavioral strategy number 3. Teach the dog to pause and use cues. So when you let your dog sit before crossing the road, it's more likely to behave. And the same applies to almost all behaviors. Like when you notice the moment before you normally take action, you're basically breaking the autopilot of behavior and you give your prefrontal cortex the opportunity to intervene. So when you feel the urge to show certain behavior, then first just name it, like I feel the urge to play poker, for example. Pause and take 3 short breaths and only then decide what to do next. The outcome will often be totally different. Which brings us to behavioral strategy number 4. Celebrate calmness, not chaos, and use rewards. So if you reward your dog to sit, at some point it will sit. Like dopamine is often released when progress is made. So reward the positive behaviors, like streaks of healthy behavior or self-control. And then notice how the positive reinforcement loops suddenly start to compete with the destructive reinforcement loops. Which brings us to behavioral strategy number 5. Fence the park and define your environment. Fact of life is that it's easier to keep your dog calm in a quiet field than to keep your dog quiet in a full park of squirrels. Like your brain loves to take the path of least resistance. So make sure to hide triggers and make bad habits harder to perform and good habits easier to perform. Because in total, all these 5 strategies have done wonders for me to get my addictive behaviors in control. To use the example of my past poker addiction, by applying these 5 strategies, I managed to set a routine. So I only play on free days or when I have nothing to do the day after. I defined clear rules. So I set clear limits on deposit and on playing amounts, which I also hard-coded in my poker software. I defined clear cues. So when I recognize the urge to play at inappropriate times, I now know how to shift to all the important topics I deal with at the moment. Fourthly, I track rewards, like I know how long I've played, and I know also how long I've managed to stay within an appropriate buy-in level. And fifthly, I adjust my environment. So just as an example, when I'm working on important things, I now minimize the amount of time I watch at poker streams. I know it's still not perfect, but it works perfectly for me to keep it in control. And as such, I still get to enjoy playing the game of poker while keeping control over the rest of my life. So now over to you. What are the activities in your life that are exciting but hard to keep in control? And how do you manage to not let these things take over your life? I would really love to hear from you in the comments. And if you made it this far anyways, please consider giving this video a like or share it with someone who might benefit from the message. It's support like this that makes the channel grow, and it's also your unique chance to still give me a little spark of dopamine today. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Much love, Tom.